You have to have a little dirt when you have an antique shop, otherwise it's not an antique shop.
We're celebrating Charlott's Antiques' 50th anniversary. The store was opened in 1966. That was 2 years prior to Hemisphere. And we've been within 5 or 6 buildings the entire time on Austin Highway. My mother was a war bride, and she worked in the mess hall, and of course at that time, you know, they weren't supposed to date any of the soldiers. She had a sister and lots of friends, and they loved to go dancing. And of course Daddy couldn't dance. He was one with 2 feet. But anyway, that didn't stop him, and they fell in love. I often questioned, you know, how did they ever communicate, because she spoke German and he spoke English, but somehow I guess they saw the sparks.
When I was 13, we could hear the bombs, you know, falling in Hamburg, Hanover. And then soon, the war was coming to an end, and they said, you got to leave Belgium, you can't stay here, you've got to go back to Germany, you're Germans. A tank came along, and they said, we're going back with the tanks, and you gotta get ready, take what you can. And so we all got in the tank. Then we caught a train. Well, the first one we missed, it just kept on rolling, we missed it completely. And we heard that it had been bombed, so I guess God still wanted us to live a little longer. Jack was a wonderful guy, and he was born and raised in Gatesville, Texas. And so my husband said to my sister, who's that young lady there? And Helen said, well, that's my sister, Charlotte. He said, oh, I've got to meet her. And so we went together for about, I guess, 6 or 7 months, and then we married. I was the first one in the little town of Charlott to get married, so people were lined up outside to see how I was dressed. I guess they thought I was a princess or something. Got transferred to England, so we came back to San Antonio, did a few things, and off to England we went, and that's where the antique business was started.
Well, in the 1970s, my mother was from Germany, and so my parents would go back to Germany and England, and they would shop and fill up a container, a 40-foot container comparable to an HEB container, and they would bring it back. And of course, again, I was still young, so I was kind of observing this, but the big dealers throughout San Antonio and maybe even outside of San Antonio would come in, and they would all be lined up ready for the doors to open. They just couldn't wait to see what was happening. And so they would actually unload the container into what was the KT Dance Hall at the time and do it all for free just because they wanted to have the first pick at the antiques coming over.
Oh, it was all so much fun. It was so much fun to go to auctions and just garage sales, what they had over there. And so soon we had it under the bed, over the bed, everywhere.
Our original store was a house, and then we moved, my parents purchased the KT Dance Hall and some other property right next door. And so the KT Dance Hall was the midpoint between San Antonio and Austin, and that is where everybody came to dance in the 1950s. So we opened the dance hall and put our store in there. It was a lot more space than we had ever had, but we did fill it up quite rapidly. And in the back, one of the things that my parents also were very forward thinking about is that they had a thrift or a flea market in the back where they would rent tables on the weekends, and people would line up to come to the flea market, which, you know, would be comparable maybe to an outdoor market here that we have now.
Here we are, 50 years later. Wish we could live 50 more years. Well, it may be a little cluttery once in a while, but that clutter doesn't bother me. I think that's good clutter.